Hello and welcome to Library Drawing Party. Today we're going to be drawing this beautiful lake scene. To get started, let's take our blue colored pencil and we're going to lightly outline the lake. So I'm drawing a blue horizon line, which is about halfway on my page. And then I'm going to draw a half circle for an island or a peninsula on this side. And then I'm going to draw another half circle on the opposite side. And then I'm going to have a half circle that connects around. So it's almost like a backward S on this side. Then I'm going to take my yellow and I'm going to lightly define the top of my horizon line. So this is about a ½ inch above the blue horizon line. Then I'm going to take my light blue and put in my what I like to call the base coat. So I'm putting down a light layer of blue. I'm using the side of my pencil for this. I want to leave a lot of white because we're going to be doing some layering on top, but this way we get our main color down. Okay, once you have your blue, and notice I'm using horizontal lines because I want my lake to be calm. And I'm going to do the same thing for the sky. So I'm going to put that light base coat down. I'm going to use long horizontal strokes because we want this to be pretty uniform since it's a calm, peaceful, sunny sky blue day. And we want this to be light because again we're going to be layering. We're also going to be drawing the trees up above, so we want to make sure that we have space to do that. If you press too hard, it's hard to layer colors on top. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with yellow. We're going to fill in that space between the horizon lines with yellow with a light base coat. Again, I'm using the side of my pencil for this. You can also flip it if that's easier. I'm going to do that on this side too. And fill in the remaining white spots. This way we get a hint of color underneath when we're drawing later on. Okay, next thing I want to do is the trees. So I'm going to use a number 2 pencil because these particular trees have a lot of gray in them. So I'm going to use that. And there's a big trunk on the island or peninsula. So I'm going to do probably a 1/4 inch here for the trunk, and it comes up above the horizon line into the sky. And then we have some big branches coming off of the trunk, so it makes almost a Y shape. And then there's a curved branch over here, and then there's a couple of other tree trunks nearby, so I'm going to draw those in. And then there's 2 on the edge here. I'm even going to extend my island out a bit more into the lake so I have room for them. And then I'm going to be drawing diagonal lines. I'm going from the left to the right now, but I'm going to switch in a minute. This is similar to a cross hatching technique, but not quite as defined because I want there to be a lot of organic shapes with our tree branches, because right now I'm working on the smaller tree branches that come off of the main ones that we drew. So I flipped directions, so I started with high left to low right, and then I flipped directions to low left, high right. And then I'm going to just add in some random branches to keep this from looking too uniform. You want some curves in there because the tree will have curved branches. You just want to make sure that when we draw the branches that they're connecting to the main ones that we drew initially. Okay, now let's draw the trees on the opposite side. So we have a really tall trunk that almost comes off the page. It's about the same thickness as our first trunk, so about 1/4 inch on my drawing. And it comes down into our first half circle. And then there's a couple of tree trunks that are closer to what could look like a D. These are not as thick. These are younger trees, so they have smaller tree trunks. And there's a couple in the back here. So now I'm going to draw my main branches. So we have one coming off to the side here, and then there's another one here, another one here, and some going this way. And then I'm going to use that similar to the cross hatching technique. So I'm going from low left to high right, and then switching from high left to low right. And again, these want to connect to those branches. And then I'm going to put in some unique ones. Keep it from being too uniform. And now let's go in and add some more color to our tree trunks. So I'm using brown. I'm going to use brown as a type of shadow. So our light source is coming this way mainly, although it's outside, so we're going to get multiple light sources from reflections. So I want our heaviest shadows to be going this way. So I'm going to be putting them on the right side of our tree trunks. And some of these tree trunks in the back, you could just make them all brown because they're so thin anyway. And then I'm going to put darker spot for some variation. And you want these to be vertical lines for the trunks, and then you can follow the branches. So we want to make sure we get those main branches This will help distinguish them from the smaller branches. And then we can add in some color for smaller branches. You can even almost scribble, because that'll give you some unique shapes, which will make it look more natural. And we want to do the same thing on the opposite side. So again, we want our heaviest shadow to be on the right. And these smaller trees can be mostly brown. And this trunk goes way up. We have our big branches. There's a lot of Y shapes in trees. And then let's add in our scribbles. Okay. I also want to put some more gray in our trunks. So I'm going to work mostly on the left side. This will help darken them up, which will be a nice contrast. So we have a lot of light colors in this design. And we do want the trees to be a focal point. I'm going to darken the trunks on this side too. A lot of trees, especially in New Jersey, have a lot of gray in them. So we may think of tree trunks as being brown, which they are, but there's definitely other colors. There's even a little bit of blue in them sometimes. But gray is a good starting place. So our number 2 pencils are perfectly designed. Help us with that. And you can even leave some of your lines. You don't need to blend this perfectly because we do want to see some texture on the trunks and the branches. You just want to make sure the lines are going in the direction. So our trunk is going to have vertical lines, so we want to be making sure we're doing vertical strokes. Okay, next up, let's work with the grass. I'm going to start with grass on our island side. So I'm going to take my green and I'm going to add in some green, but I don't want to cover the whole thing because there's a lot of variation in the ground in this drawing. So I'm going to put in, it's almost like stripes, but we want it to be organic, so don't this being uniform. We don't want it to be uniform. Then I'm going to take some brown and mix that in because there's going to be some patches of dirt showing through. You can even use a lighter green for this. Maybe you want to emphasize some pieces of grass, so you can put in some vertical lines for the grass. Then once you have the colors the way you want, you can lock them in with a yellow. And since this is a lake scene, there might be some sand mixed in with the dirt, which is why I'm choosing yellow. And it goes right into the water. I'm going to add in a little bit more brown. We don't want this to be bright yellow. We want it to be like a sandy yellow. And I don't want this to be a perfectly formed line. We do want pieces to jut out because then it'll look more natural. I'm going to take some green and I'm going to darken the edges. Give it a bit of shadow right by the lakeside. I'll put in some more shadows by the trees. Again, our light source is coming this way, so we want our shadows to be going towards the right. You can even use some of your number 2 pencil for a darker line. Add in some more brown. Okay, once you have your island or peninsula drawn, then let's work on the opposite side. So along the shoreline there's a lot of rocks. So I'm going to be drawing circles and ovals, which get bigger as they get closer. These rocks should be about the same size as the horizon line. So I have maybe a little bit smaller. I have about 1/2 inch horizon line here, so I want these to be about 1/4 inch. You can use the trunks of your trees as a good example. And I want there to be texture on the rocks, so I'm leaving my circles when I'm filling in my strokes. I'm leaving those visible. The rocks get smaller as they get farther away, so I'm going to break this up into smaller rocks. So these rocks should be about 1/2 the size of these ones. As things get further away, they appear smaller. There's also some grasses. So I'm going to add in some brown. Then I'm going to use the brown to create a beach. I want some of these rocks to be darker, so I'm going to put in some shadow. And again, our shadow is going this way, so we want our heaviest shadow to be falling towards the right. Okay, then I'm going to take my green. I'm going to add, using light green, I'm adding in some grass here. I'm using mostly a vertical and diagonal lines. Then I'm going to add in some light green that comes up to the rocky edge where the trees are planted. And then I want to use some diagonal lines, again similar to the cross hatching that we were using for the trees. Have some grass come down along the beach line. You want to leave some white patches because you want some of the dirt to show through, because it won't be a perfectly grassy area. I'm going to use smaller strokes above, show that it's in the distance, but we do want to see some of that grassy texture. I'm going to take my yellow, I'm going to blend this in a bit. If your green is more on the blue side like mine was, this will also help make it a little bit of a warmer color. And we'll get that nice sandy beach. Okay, then I'm going to take some of my dark green and add in some more grass tone. This will give it a bit more variation. Then I'm going to take my brown and put in another layer of brown going across. This will be like the dirt peeking through the grass. You can use a circular motion by the beach. You want this side and this side to be pretty close, so I'm going to use the close in color. So I'm going to use the dark green near the tree trunks for shadow. Add in a bit more dark green, especially by the rocks. There might be some moss growing near the rocks. The highlight the shadows with brown, and just mix everything in a little bit more. At this point, we don't want white to be showing through. We want this to be nice and colorful. You could even use blue for some of the rocks, using a dark blue for shadow. Okay, now before we work with our blues, let's work on the buildings in the background. So we have a nice big white building right along the horizon line. So I'm using some jagged lines to show the roof, and that there's some different parts to the building. Looks like there's a door here, so I'm draw in some small squares, and maybe there's some windows. We want these to be pretty small, almost like dots. There might be a door on this side. And it looks like there's a blue roof, so I'm going to take my dark blue and put in the roof line, which has a lot of diagonal lines. And there's probably going to be some brown right in front so people can walk up to it. I actually use brown to define my horizon line a bit more. Then there's a building on this side, which is getting covered a bit by the trees, but we can still see a little bit of it. So I'm going to hint at the door. It's going to have that same blue roofing. And maybe there's some on this side. Okay. Then I want to put in some more brown by the road. Then I'm going to take my dark green and put in trees along the horizon line. And I'm just going to be using small vertical lines for this, because the trees are far in the distance We're not going to be able to see them very well, but we'll know they're there. And let's take our brown and add that in as well. These could be like evergreens, since our trees in the front don't quite have leaves on them yet. Then I'm going to use some yellow for beachy bottom. Can even put in some more brown. Okay, now that we have our horizon line defined, let's go in and finish up the lake and the sky. Let's work on the sky first. So we want this to be pretty light still, but we want to be filling in most of the white. So I'm working in the middle first because I don't want to cover up our branches too much. And it gets darker as it goes up. So our lightest part is here, and then it works, as it works its way up, it gets darker. So we want the top to be pretty dark. If you're using a dark blue for this, you're going to want to be extra gentle with your strokes. I'm using a light blue so I can be a little bit firmer in my strokes. Then I'm going to lightly go over the branches. You can go right over the tree trunks because color is not going to be dark enough to cover it up. Okay, now we have our sky drawn. Add in a little bit more color. Then for the lake, you're going to want to do the same thing. Color this all in. There should be no white showing. And we want to use the horizontal strokes to show a nice, calm, peaceful day. There's not that many waves. Unless if you want to show some waves, you can do more of these types of strokes, but that's not what I'm going for in my drawing. So I'm going straight across all the way to the edge. And then we need to draw the reflection in the water. So where the tree trunk is, I'm going to add in my trunk, and this doesn't need to be as defined as before when we were doing the trunk because you're not going to be able to see everything, but we do want to add that reflection in. I'm adding in my smaller branches, and I want to add in a bit of brown, not quite as much as I did in the actual tree, because the color is going to be a little bit distorted, then it's a reflection. And then I'm going to take my dark blue and really emphasize the horizon line. You want this to be really dark so you can tell that it's far away. Your eye is drawn right to it. And then, like we did with the sky, we want this to be the darkest part. So we want there to be nice dark strokes up by the horizon line, and then it gradually fades as it gets towards the bottom, so our color lightens as we go along. And you can do this with the pressure of your pencil. So as it gets lighter, you're going to press lightly on the page. And this will fill in any of the white spots that we have remaining. Then you can go a little bit darker where the trees are. It'll help emphasize the branches that we drew. We want to go right up to the edge because we don't want to see any white. And you can even put some along the shoreline, some extra blue. And there you have it. That's our lake. Thank you for joining us in this week's library drawing party. We have library drawing parties every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and keep being creative.